In this lecture, we're going to review about Hinduism, which is one of the oldest religions in the world that is still practiced today. So, Hinduism is very unique compared to some of the other major religions we're going to look at this semester. First of all, there's no single founder, no single sacred text, and not even a single special event that marks the beginning of Hinduism. Instead, it's always been really fluid and has kind of adapted as time goes on. Similar to the Native American religions, it's also very diverse in terms of different groups within Hinduism and different beliefs that they have and different practices. Second, the word Hinduism itself is relatively new in describing the religion. Until the 19th century, the word Hinduism didn't even exist. So originally, the term Hindu was meant to describe someone based on their geographic location rather than someone that adhered to the religion of Hinduism. And then finally, nearly 15% of the world population today practices Hinduism. So you can see it is a major religion in the world. But the majority of the people that practice Hinduism live in Nepal and India. So, looking at the teachings of Hinduism, this is where we start to get into a lot of diversity. So, looking specifically at what Hindus believe about divine reality, they really fall into two categories. The first is monistic, and then the second category is dualistic. So, Hindus that are monistic believe that there's no distinction between the divine and the natural world. Ultimately, all reality is one. On the other hand, dualistic Hindus believe that there is a God who is personal and separate from the natural reality. So, this God or gods lives outside of this natural world that we live in. Today, most Hindus they fall into this dualistic category, but we are going to look at both the beliefs of the monistics and the dualistics because, as I said, this kind of changes over time, and so both, categories are important to understand when it comes to the Hindu religion. Each of these two groups have different names or kind of different language when thinking about this divide between the divine and the natural world. Those that are monistic use the term Brahman to refer to this supreme unitary reality that is the source of all being and all knowing. And then, on the other hand, those that are dualistic do recognize that there is a God, but they can use this term God kind of in a way that is all-encompassing for the many deities that they believe in. So when they're referring to one of these specific divine figures, they'll use that specific name. But just in general, they do believe in this sense of their being, gods. So this really is one of the key beliefs in Hinduism, is that there are many gods, but they all come from this one divine reality. So, one reality, many gods. And then another belief about divine reality is it's actually lived out through intentional sound. Om is the very expression of Brahman, and it's the sound through which the universe is manifested. But like the rest of Hinduism, there's even a lot of diversity here in terms of the significance of Om and the implications in terms of how that is practiced and why it's practiced and what it means. And then finally, both groups within Hinduism, those both monistic and dualistic, they hold to the belief that the natural world is an expression of the divine world. So this often leads to worship of this natural world, such as worshiping rivers, mountains, the sun, just different things that we find in nature. So for the Hindu, all living things are sacred. So, continuing on with teachings of Hinduism, two of the most popular deities in Hinduism are Krishna and Rama. And these are both avatars, meaning that they are a descent of God to earth in a physical form with specific goals. And they have these goals of helping the world and preserving the order of the world. And these avatars are from the god Vishnu, who has 10 avatars in total. The first 9 have come, so the dualistic Hindus believe that 9 of these avatars have come and lived on Earth, but the last one is still awaited. And so it will arrive at the end of the present age, and it will usher in this time of peace. So then moving on to some other Hindu beliefs, we now turn to beliefs about the individual that Hindus have. First, all Hindus believe in what is called Atman, which is the undying self or soul, the true self. It's not a physical body, but rather it moves from one physical body to the next. Hindus feel that there's this task of trying to determine who this true self is. It's something that is rarely achieved and takes several lifetimes through incarnation to get to this point of finding one's true Atman. Next, looking at the word karma. Karma just means action or the consequences of action. It's very similar to cause and effect. If a good deed is done, then that person can expect good karma to come in the future to them. If a bad deed is done, then there will be bad consequences later. So Hindus see the idea of karma playing out in life for all people, and all actions affect the future in good and bad ways. And this isn't limited to just one lifetime, but rather one's karma affects their next life that they are reincarnated into. Next, Dharma is the idea of living in a way that upholds cosmic and social order. So it really just means law or duty or righteousness. The Dharma is the guide for good behavior, the guide for how to live as a Hindu. Next, the samsara is the continuing cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. When the body dies, the Atman, or the soul, moves on to another body. And this will continue until the true Atman is fully realized. And then finally, moksha is the release or liberation from the samsara. So it occurs when the Atman has been fully realized. And for monastics, this means that it's union between the Atman and the Brahman. No more self exists. So oneself just kind of is done away with. It is conjoined with this divine source. But for dualistic Hindus, this means that the Atman is in eternal existence in the company of God. So moksha marks the end of the cycle of life and death and the effects of karma. So it's really the liberation of one from this cycle of life and death over and over again. And there are 3 paths to liberation that I think are most popular. There are more than that. There are several paths that Hindus take that they think will get a person to this point of liberation or to moksha. But each of the 3 highlighted here are focused on one part of Hindu life or another. And basically, this is just about what actions can a person do that will get them closer to this point of being free, closer to this point of liberation. So karma marga emphasizes ritual and ethical works. So it's about trying to live right. Bhakti marga is about devotion to a deity. So this is about worshiping in temples and worshiping in home. And this is one of the most widely practiced approaches today for Hindus. And then the Jnana Marga is focused on study and contemplation and spiritual insight. And these are not exclusive. So usually Hindus will practice all three of these with the hopes that these approaches will get them closer to that point of liberation. So continuing on talking about the Hindus' beliefs when it comes to individuality. The Hindu's individual quest for freedom is played out in life based on the lot that each has been given in terms of gender, caste status, and age. So we're going to look at what this caste system is and also what the 4 stages of life are. So you can think of the caste system as basically what class you are in or where you rank in terms of society. So there are 4 classes. You have up top the kind of the top class in society is the priestly class, and then you have the warrior or administrator class, and then the producer class, which is more farmers and merchants, and then you have the servant class. Since these 4 classes were developed, more recently a 5th class has been kind of added to the ranks, and they are known as the untouchables or the outcasts. And these are the people that are the most oppressed or marginalized in the society. So today in India, nearly 20% of the population of India is considered to be in this outcast group. The caste system doesn't have the same amount of influence as it has always had, but it is still very much a part of Hindu culture. And then looking at the 4 stages of life, this is also very important. To fulfill the duties in each stage is to repay 3 debts in life, and that is a debt to the ancient seers, a debt to the gods, and a debt to the ancestors. So Hindu sacred texts clearly state how to move from one stage to the next. So people, young people, will start out as students, and then when they get married, they will move up to the householder stage. And then in the latter years of one's life, they are in the forest dwelling or renouncer stages. And basically in these 2 stages, they are just focused on trying to reach that goal of liberation from this physical life. So you can think of the 4 stages of life as one's social and family responsibilities throughout life. Continuing on, then there are the 4 aims of life. And these are about a person's spiritual purposes and goals. Hindus are meant to diligently pursue these goals in every stage of their life, no matter how old they are. And so that's the dharma, the duty or the law, the kama, which is sensual enjoyment, the artha, which is material wealth, trying to gain as much money as you can, and the moksha, back to that liberation of the soul, of the true self. Okay, so now looking at the sacred texts of Hinduism, we see that there are several. They're composed of different languages, and they were written over a wide span of several centuries. So we'll just touch on each one of these. The Vedas, they are believed to be not composed by man, but rather heard by man, in that they were divinely inspired. So there are 4 collections of texts that are considered Vedas, and they each contain hymns to different deities or gods. The next text is the Upanishads, which is a term that just means sitting down near a teacher. These texts are more philosophical in nature and describe contexts or concepts such as karma and the reincarnation of the soul. So they explain some of these more abstract beliefs within Hinduism. And then the next 2, Ramayana and Mahabharata. These are two of the most significant epics in Hinduism. So, two very important stories or narratives that shape the Hindus' beliefs and practices. So, these also help teach the law, the Dharma, and teach how to live. Next, you have the Bhagavad Gita, and this is the Song of the Lord. And it is a text that reads as a conversation between two of the gods. It includes the three paths to liberation as well as other ways that one can pursue moksha. Finally, the Puranas, these are a collection of mythic stories, and they contain historical information such as the genealogies of important kings in Hindu history, as well as how there came to be this divide between dualistic and monistic Hindus. So then there are three primary sects within Hinduism that all are kind of focused around one of the major deities or gods in Hinduism. So within each sect, there are unique ideas for how to worship, unique philosophical positions, and unique emphases on the sacred texts that they have and on the saints they revere. So the first one is devoted to the god Vishnu that I mentioned earlier that has the 10 avatars. The next is devoted to the god Shiva, and the next is devoted to the great god or great goddess Devi. So now looking at Hinduism as a way of life. A Hindu will be very quick to tell you that their religion is best described as a way of life rather than a system of beliefs. So in this religion, there is a much greater emphasis on how one lives and the things they do rather than the things they believe. A major part of this way of life is going to a temple to worship, but Hindus do not say that it is worship. Instead, it is called darshan, which means to see. This is supposed to be an act where the person both looks upon and sees the divine, and the divine looks upon the person that has come to worship. And the purpose of this is to establish a loving relationship between the individual and the divine, the God. The seeing is done through images that are placed throughout the temple or at someone's personal shrine in their home. So then continuing on, the word puja is often used to describe worship in Hinduism. Simply put, this involves making some kind of offering to the deity, such as fruit or incense or flowers. And it's laid down in specific places of worship, such as laid down in the temple or in the shrine in someone's home or at pilgrimage sites, and then other places where there are shrines. So this is basically just leaving a gift at a shrine. Arati is a form of this worship, which is an offering of light. So a lamp is lit and waved in a clockwise direction in front of the image of the deity, and this is thought to remove any evil influences. And then mantras, you may be slightly familiar with this. These are ritual formulas that are said to produce some kind of spiritual effect. So they have a variety of purposes, such as to heighten the awareness of God, to help in meditation, or to produce some kind of magical effect. So going back to the Om that I talked about earlier, that is considered a mantra. And then finally, sacrifice involves building an altar, building a fire, and then throwing things into the fire while chanting the mantras. This is a big part of temple rituals and is usually reserved to be done by a Brahmin priest. And then finally, yoga, I'm sure you're familiar with, in its simplest terms means uniting oneself with God. It is the many systems of physical and mental exercise that has been developed within the Hindu tradition. So, while this term includes the yoga that we think about today as a physical exercise, the motivation is different for the Hindu. The action is seen as an act of worship, as trying to grow closer to this deity. It's not what we think of as yoga in terms of just, it being something, an activity that's good for your physical health. So then coming to rites of passages, just like in the Native American religions, rites of passage are an important part of the Hindu way of life. They're intended to bring blessings and divine favor on a person at important times of transition within their life. So, your textbook gives just a few examples of this, such as a boy's initiation, which happens at the age of 8 when they can start performing certain religious functions. This is mostly reserved for boys that are born into a very high caste system. A girl's first cycle once she reaches puberty. This is a ritual for girls of all classes in society. A feast is given announcing her ability for marriage, and this woman is taken to the temple to receive a special blessing. And pretty much from this point forward, the young girl or the woman is unable to spend time with men or boys when she is unsupervised. In the marriage ceremony, sacrifices are made to the gods through fire, and then there are several symbolic actions done within the ceremony that are meant to bless the marriage and make it be seen as favorable before the gods. Finally, when a Hindu dies, they are often cremated. This is known as the last or final sacrifice. While there are circumstances where the body is buried instead of cremated, it is definitely more common for Hindus to be cremated, and it's often done by the family members, which is interesting. And then looking at pilgrimage, this is another just part of Hindu life. Hindus will often travel to places that are considered sacred or that are believed to be on the border between the natural world and the divine. And so people that adhere to Hinduism will often go on these pilgrimages to see these sacred places. And actually, you will see in this map some trails that are taken on these pilgrimages across India. Now looking at the role of women in Hinduism. For most of the past, Hindu culture has really tended towards the marginalization of women. Hindu sacred texts give little attention to women other than a few exceptions. But today, women are becoming less marginalized and are taking on more prominent roles in the religion, such as being priests, being spiritual teachers, and even sometimes theologians. And then the vrata is a vow of temporary self-denial that involves a short period of fasting or a short period of silence. So women will often do this for a specific purpose, such as to ensure the health and wellness of her husband and her family. The vratas are usually all taken on special festival days. So on these days, many women across the country, across the world, will take these vows. And then looking at some popular festivals and holidays, there are 3 mentioned here. Many festivals are linked to mystical events and to the agricultural cycle. So They kind of are, they happen at specific times throughout the year, but there's also kind of this supernatural narrative that goes along with the festival. So the first one is the Navaratri festival, and it celebrates the end of monsoon season in India, and also the end of a war between a god and a demon king. So altars are set up for different deities, and the festival lasts for 10 days. And then looking at Diwali, this is a 5-day festival of lights in October, and it commemorates a god's return. Different regions of India celebrate this holiday in many different ways. And then finally, the last holiday or festival is Holi, which is celebrated in the spring and is very colorful. And interestingly, social and gender hierarchies are inverted. So it's kind of a new way once a year for the community to interact with one another. And then performance traditions are another big aspect of Hindu life. The Ram Lila, these are costume dramas based on the Ramayana, and through this performance, young boys are able to embody divinity. So that's an important tradition. There is also the Bhajan and the Kirtan, which are sacred songs to help a person think about the divine, to contemplate the divine. And then finally, storytelling, which, if you remember the importance of this from the Native American religions, it's very similar in that these stories are a primary way that Hindus can learn the content of their religion. So now coming to the common categories, the main things we want to focus on in each major religion. What is ultimate reality in Hinduism? Monistic Hindus believe that Brahman is the supreme unitary reality, the ground of all being, whereas and the Brahman manifests itself in the world. So no distinction between the divine and the natural world. And then for dualistic or devotional Hindus, they do believe in this ultimate reality being embodied in a god or a deity, such as Vishnu or Shiva. Going on to the practices of Hinduism, there is a major aspect of Hinduism that is this birth and rebirth cycle, where a person is trying to move their true self to find liberation. We talked about the 3 paths that lead to this liberation, or this moksha, which you can think of as action, knowledge, and devotion. All the while, Hindus are required to live in conformity with the Dharma, so they're meant to live as upstanding citizens and to be moral creatures. Finally, the ultimate purpose of the Hindu is to reach moksha, to reach liberation from this cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. It's almost impossible to describe fully from the perspective of this world the experience of moksha. It's one of infinite awareness and eternal bliss. For monistic Hindus, moksha means the full realization of the identity of the self with the Brahman. And then for the dualistic Hindus, moksha is the complete realization of the soul's deep, loving relationship with God. So, there you have it. That is a pretty sort of in-depth summary of your textbook reading on Hinduism.